Manfred, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. As I mentioned to you earlier, I've been following your work, and I think this is going to be such a treat for everybody listening today to hear some of your wisdom. But before we even get started, I wanted to ask you to introduce yourself briefly and tell us how you got into be doing what you do today. That's a loaded question.
Yeah,
Right.
that's not an easy question. Of course, I thought about that
Yeah.
a little bit why I do what I do. And I think if you really, I mean, I'm of course, from a developmental point of view, I think I have a strong memory of my grandfather listening to the radio, and I was sitting beside him listening to the Nuremberg trials in Germany after of the trials of the Nazis. And I think that has influenced me quite a bit. My grandfather and my grandparents and my mother were hiding around 12, 13 people during the war. One of the big problems was, of course, food, how to feed all these people. And I'm born during the war, so even though I don't consciously aware of it, I may have some screen memories. My grandfather was beaten up by the Nazis. He was living in Germany at the time. So it was interesting. When this crazy special military operation started, or the war between Ukraine and Russia, I was in Moscow. I was doing a workshop for top executives. The workshop exploded when they heard about. I felt that was not going to happen. It was not. I was not very predictive that Putin would not make such an not very wise strategic decision. So that evening, I still remember. I deliberately stayed in Moscow. I could have left the same day. I could have gotten out, and I saw how people were beaten up, who were protesting against it. Then I also had dinner with one of my ex-students, who was the head of a bank, and telling me that his wife was in Kiev and his daughter, how to get them out, which is the craziness of it all. And then next day I listened to the television, even though I don't speak Russian, but there was the head of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Duma talking about what was happening, and you get a kind of parallel world
Yeah.
of paranoia. I mean, who wants to invade Russia? Napoleon tried, Hitler tried. I mean, nobody wants to, but there was a world of paranoia. Anyhow, I've been running for many years a seminar at INSEAD, which I sometimes call my CEO recycling seminar, which has been actually a source of much of my writing. And my fantasy was always, I always take 21 people, and they might be responsible for 100,000 people, because some run very large corporations.
Right.
And so my fantasy always had been when I can make them a little bit more reflective, a little bit more humane, a little bit more emotionally intelligent. Who knows? It might rub off in the way they deal with the people in the organization. So that's maybe just a fantasy, but we need fantasies. Otherwise, really, as from a clinical point of view, I think it has been memories of my grandfather listening to those Nuremberg trials and my mother talking about the difficulties she had to get food for all the people in the house, and then the terror that sometimes it was in a small village, which was it was a very religious village, so they had very strong. They knew that there were the neighbors knew that there were other people there, but they kept their mouth shut. And of course, it was also again if you would be caught, you would go to a you would be exported to a concentration camp. So it's very dangerous. But that has been quite imprinted on me, that particular, and that's the reason I've been very much interested what can be done to create more reflective leaders.
Wow. I'm thinking as you mentioned, you said, I hope that we can make at least a little dent, right? A little have people be a little more reflective.
Mm.
Talk to me a little bit about, do you think that's possible? Do you think that leadership as a whole, in the world can change? Is it consciousness? Is it the human condition? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Of course, that's a very paradoxical question. If I don't
Yeah.
believe you change, I would not do what I'm doing. I would do something else. I mean, I do something. I mean, somebody once said, "It's something about cutting wood, you see immediate results." So that's not always is leadership. I mean, I've been a pioneer. Coaching became very popular, as you know, and you have been involved in it yourself. But I became quite interested in group coaching, group and team coaching, which is
Mhm.
probably a little bit more complex. I'm nothing against one-to-one coaching, but it there is an I'm a very impatient person, which is actually terrible because I'm a psychoanalyst, and so you should be patient. But I'm quite impatient. I want results. I always say it's not originated from me. When one person says you have ears like a donkey, ignore it. But if 10 people tell you so, you might get yourself a saddle. So what I'm trying to say is that a person has certain behavior patterns which were very useful at a certain point in his life or her life, but it's no longer functional at adult. I mean, probably they were developed as a way of survival at an earlier stage in life. I had a lady in my class some years ago, and she was the chairman of the board or chairperson of the board. And as the chairperson of the board, she liked to talk. She was used that she talked, people listened. So now, if you're in class, there are 21 people, and they all, rather powerful individuals, also used to talk. So I want to be fair, and you have to put your hand in the air to say, it's my turn. But I knew when she would, let's call her Mary or so, when Mary would raise her hand, I knew there would be a long, long, long. And so I said to myself, there she is again, but I have to let her talk. I mean, she has been hand in the air now for a while. It is not. So, and I said, in the meantime, I tell myself, please, Mary, shut up. Shut up. Shut up. But I keep my mouth shut. I've actually a few times in my life have actually with interesting effects. I've told the CEO to shut up, which is interesting because they're not used to it. And
Exactly,
they
exactly.
shut up. They shut up. But
They
anyhow, I
probably
didn't.
did. They probably heard you. Yes.
But I didn't do anything. I just kept my
Right.
mouth shut. So the second module is a modular program. So after 2 months, she came back, and not a peep, nothing. So I get concerned after class.
Like what happened? Did I
uh, what, what's going on?
traumatize you? You traumatized her.
Oh no, not at all. Not at all. I didn't do anything. That's the point. That's the point. But apparently, since a program which is basically it's not online, it's all in one entity.
They gave her
Um,
feedback.
at breakfast time, at lunchtime, at dinner time, her colleagues told her,
Gave her feedback.
you
Yeah.
gave feedback. Maybe you should listen a little bit more. It might be interesting to listen what people have to say instead of talking all the time. So she did that in between, and she learned a lot. And that's what she told me.
Wow.
So the narcissist cured the narcissist. It was fantastic. I didn't have to do anything. I just kept my. Of
Uh,
course, I said I created the ambiance, the stage that people are going to talk about it. So and basically, in that respect, I just wrote a book on storytelling for leaders. But we had storytellers, so I asked people to tell their story, and it's not so easy. You said, "Oh, okay, if you would make a documentary of your life, you have 45, 50 minutes.
yeah.
Are the scenes you're going to put in there?"
Yeah. I do
No,
that too. Yeah. It's very powerful. That's
But not,
huge.
but not as easy to pick the scenes. What scenes are you going to pick?
Yeah.
Because some scenes you're not very proud of. But if you don't say anything, you don't get anything. So it's a very tricky dance. And then of course, when people tell their story, and I guess some Italian psychologists talk about mirror neurons. The mirror neurons start to work. So narrative transportation. So at least I do. I see it myself. I've had so many stories. I move into the story. I experience the story. I mean, I mean, storytelling since Paleolithic times. And of course, after the story, the person, of course, has some catharsis, which is one thing already. It's just a relief. I did my story. But other side, people are going to give feedback about the story and said, "My God, I had the same situation. What did I do at the time?" And so you get lots of feedback, and and of course, I take somewhat of a developmental orientation to try to help people figure out why they do what they do. So I point that out. It's quite Socratic to push
Yeah.
them in certain directions. Uh, so they get some greater insight. Why do you use certain defenses? Why are certain themes important to them? And why are certain themes no longer relevant? They're not. I had, for example, when the pandemic started, I got one of media baron, not Murdoch, by the way, another media baron. send me a note, a little feedback after 12 years, which is a little bit late for feedback. I like it a little bit earlier. Said, thank you, Manfred. I, I have the courage, thanks to you and in your program, not to fire anybody, not to fire the suppliers. I have decided to give the executive team like half their salary, and I'm going to get, things for the hospitals to, the masks and things like that. And it was very nice, but he was a very anxious man. He didn't see that, of course, because a lot of posturing, but deep down he was very anxious running that company. And so, of course, that's incidental, anecdotal, but I've seen people make major, major changes in their life. So that's what I do, tipping points. But of course, the question is, that's the reason those programs have been quite long. They have to practice it. They take, because you go in stressful situation, you might go back to your automatic pilot, what you were used to. And so how to experiment with new way of acting. And of course, it depends also on their family situation. They come to my courses usually. They want to be better leaders. They want to have better and more effective teams. They want to they want to have change the corporate culture. But in the end, they talk about their mothers, their fathers, their spouses, their children, their life. I wrote also the book Sex, Money, Happiness, and Death, which is really the themes they really talk about. Sex, not in the way of just having sex, but also relationships more.
Yeah. No, it's interesting as you talk. I mean, you're identifying something that's so big is the human condition, right? So everyone that you're talking to and everybody that I talk to is a human at the end, right? And it's a whole human. And I feel as if people compartmentalize that so much. It's like, okay, well, I'm this, I have this title or whatever. And you talk about some very human things, and you're also talking about the inner work that needs to happen with people in as they make changes. So talk
I
to
mean,
me, talk to me a little bit about what you think that is. I mean, what is inner work?
you look at the themes in a person's life. One has to do with to realize what really gives me energy. And I think it was Gardner, I think at Harvard, who talked about various forms of
Mm.
intelligence, political to musical to whatever it might be. And so, what really gives me a sense of flow? Then also, some people have some kind of purpose in life, which is future oriented. And then I think normally we have to make two major decisions in life. Probably some more, but two major ones, which of course has to do with the choice of partner, in which we not always do very well, which will look at divorce rate. And the other choice is the choice of career. Those are difficult decisions. I mean, I can see how my grandchildren also are struggling with that. What should I focus on? And then you have also uh, and I think, of course, in the famous Harvard study, the longitudinal study, which I've been quite influenced by, it was probably the longest study ever done of the sophomores at Harvard, with a control group, asking them what was most important in their lives, which has to do with good relationship with family and friends, sense of belonging. And then in addition, it probably is this life stage I am in. So you have all those different factors going around.
Yeah.
Then you have, I've now quite a few clients who have become very wealthy, and then they struggle with the legacy. And do they want to be the richest person in the graveyard? What can they do?
Yeah.
So that's, I call it more transcendence, and giving is better than taking. It makes you also feel better. It's good for your longevity. There's lots of benefits. So all those circles, control, belonging, purpose, uh, transcendence, float around, competence, and in the center is meaning. What gives my life meaning? When I deal with people, for example, also on a coaching base, one-to-one basis, I talk about anything. It's not just talking about their job, but I can switch to their relationships, different
Right. Oh,
relationships,
absolutely.
and
And
not
that
say,
has a huge impact on people. I mean, I talk to people a lot about relationships, and it's not compartmentalized. What is happening in their relationships is impacting their everything. And so, no,
exactly.
you're absolutely right. So what is your thought on that when people try to compartmentalize? leaders try to compartmentalize, like, here I am today, I'm the head of this, and then I have all this other stuff going on in my life, but
Not
not
just
going to
me.
worry about that. I'm sorry.
They have no chance.
Yeah, right.
They have no chance to compartmentalize. But I can see coaches. They said, I'm this kind of coach. I'm a career coach. I'm doing this. I mean, bullshit. I mean, it's a holistic approach to
Yeah.
people's lives. It's kind of splitting. I can see if you're a sports coach, fine, you can help, but
Right.
forget it. Forget it. I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
And I ask about their dreams, which I think nobody does actually. Very few coaches do. Now, talk about their nightmares, which is of course an interesting thing because when people have nightmares, there's something really going on. I ask about their sleep habits.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily ask about their sex life, but they will probably tell me about it eventually. But no, it's an important when you talk about relationships, you can split it in three parts, which has to do with sexual passion, care, and intimacy. So those fluctuate. And now I have some clients who are into sexual passion, but there's nothing else, and it is a very empty existence. And so how to make a better choice in their life. And usually they are divorced. That's what
Right.
that that's there, and they're very lonely.
Or
And
if they're
how
in a very tumultuous relationship that they're not leaving or can't leave or whatever, that's a whole other impact, right? I mean, that also,
exactly.
yeah. Uh, Talk to me a little bit. I mean, I know I actually could talk to you all day because I so resonate with everything you're talking about. Talk to me a little bit about what you've learned about people and people in leadership roles at these highest levels. Because I mean, seriously, I mean, you've been doing this for a while. You have all this background and knowledge, but what have you learned?
I always say everybody is normal until you know them better. That's my.
I love that one.
You see all those very well packaged. I was funny. I was last month. I was in Seoul. I was giving a talk to I think it was 1,200 people, and I was sitting there on the front row, and the first speaker was the dean of a business school, and he was talking about, of course, about AI. You have
Mm.
to realize all those Koreans, all properly dressed, all, and they are very highly motivated. I must say, they're very hardworking people. They're sitting there, and so the person was talking for an hour and a half, and I mean, and I know people's attention span is not that high. I said, my God, and no break. I was next. I said, I have to, an hour and a half, I have to go on that podium and have to entertain that whole group there. So how do I get a break? So, so I basically I stumbled on the podium, and then and then after I was on the podium introduced, they had introduced me. Then I stumbled back and started to ask the first person I could see. I mean, of course, the problem was also I had to be careful because many people had headphones because of simultaneous translation. So it's not good to accost the person who doesn't understand immediately what I'm saying. But so that I'm trying. I always say that the average attention span of a person is 20 minutes. After that, they start to fantasize. And for men, something like 78% of the fantasies are of a sexual nature. So I lost. They said most of you are no longer here. So how can I get you awake? So I asked. Anyhow, I know I'm deviating, but how to get people engaged, how to get people awake, how to get people start to think about themselves. So I do, and if you realize that 90 to 95% of behavior is unconscious, which is not,
Mm.
people don't like that. Don't
Yeah.
like, they like to be in control.
Control.
You
Right.
want to, yeah. Are you a stranger to yourself? 90 to 95%. Of course, much of it is procedural unconsciousness. I mean, I some time ago, I broke my spine. And so I had to learn how to walk again. But you don't think about walking. I have to think one step forward, one step forward. So that's part of the unconscious processes. Otherwise, you have to practice that again. So I have to, coming back to my original comment, is I have to help people practice different kinds of behavior. So there's a 7C framework, 7C framework of leadership. Of course, in that context, people sometimes ask me, what makes for an, also you asked it there about for effective leader. And
Yes.
it's difficult to answer because there are a number of filters. The filters are the industry. I mean, for example, I had the managing partner of McKinsey as a student. It's a very different leadership style than running a steel factory in the Caucasus.
Yeah,
So you have the cultural influence. I mean, you know that. I mean, Greek leadership style is different from Swedish leadership style. It's very different.
absolutely.
So
Very.
there are a lot of filters. So it really depends on the, and also, I argue leadership is a team sport. So that you can't do it alone. You have to figure it out. Actually, when I was the director of our leadership center, I had went into psychometrics, which I don't like, by the way, but I had to as a defensive move. So I developed lots of 360 questionnaires.
Yeah, it's wait, can I stop you there for a minute? Because I have the same feeling about that. So why don't you like them?
It's not my strength.
Yeah.
So what I did, well, actually, I teamed up with the best psychometrician in France,
Yeah.
and he kept me honest. So I developed, but there's nothing to do. I have nothing against it. But it's the thing is, I had to, uh, you know, uh, we have a big business school, and group coaching became important. But group coaching is not mass production. I mean, I said I was in Seoul talking to 1,200 people. Fine. But coaching is small group. I mean, you talk about group coaching, the optimum group, I think, is around five
Right.
to do for a day. But people need some information. And it is expensive to have those coaches. So they need some information to work with. So as a quickie, the 360 feedback thing is helpful. I sometimes call it 720 because I use 720 because I don't only want feedback from work, but also in private life. So you
Yeah.
get the whole.
The whole picture. Yeah, that's great.
Because
Yeah.
I've discovered that some people say my boss is an idiot, my colleagues are idiots, my direct reports are idiots. When your grown-up daughter tells your pa's an idiot, ta-da!
There
They
it
don't like,
is.
they don't like that. They start moving. So so that's the reason I had to develop those. And of course, in best of all worlds, you don't have to do that, but you don't have much of a choice because people come there for a day. They need some information to work with, and
Yeah.
that's the basis
And
because you
it
don't.
gives you a platform, it gives you a starting point, a platform to have a conversation, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest benefit of that. Yes.
So I talked about actually I wrote also a book called Leading Wisely. So I said there's a number of lessons, to simplify life for people. And said, okay, as a wise leader, I already said to you, your leadership is different depending on the situation. Leadership is a team sport, so you should really know your strengths and weaknesses. I developed a questionnaire actually called the Leadership Archetype Questionnaires, where I have different leadership styles. Some people are deal makers,
Right.
some some people are change agents, some people are coaches, some people are innovators, whatever. So I developed that too, so that people can identify a little bit with and give some ideas about themselves. But also I said about some of the themes which I find in effective leaders is one, for example, lesson one in that book. I say it's the golden rule: treat others like you want to be treated yourself. And that's not
That's not what?
but
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say? I didn't, I couldn't hear that.
not always, do you know the person who cleans the offices, for example, or you just deal with the people out, are you very good in upward management and things like that? So treat people properly. And I've seen so often that's not the case, that people become quite snotty and nasty, whatever it might be. The other one I think is very important, I think also for more for general function is the element of forgiveness. Also forgiving yourself, but or forgiving others, because if you don't forgive, it's like a sore which sits there all the time. You don't make your life happier. This element of self-care and self-compassion is very, very important. Otherwise, people have this big monkey on their back all the time. Envy is a very powerful force. How to deal with that? And can you go beyond? It's a very dark and one of the seven sins. And we don't talk about envy so quickly, but it's there. It's the basis for progressive taxation, for example. I think envy is always there.
Hmm. And we don't talk about the dark side at all of ourselves, right? We always see it in others and don't see it in our, but that's a whole other conversation that we could
Oh,
have.
no, I wrote the book, The Dark Side of
I
Leadership.
know you did. I know you did. I have that book. But
That's it.
that whole shadow of what we don't see the darker elements in ourselves, and those come out as well.
Part of yourself.
Right.
So accept it. Accept it and make the best out of it, not just put it in. Some people say put it in a box and I don't want to look at it, but it will pop up. If you don't deal with it, it will pop up unexpectedly. You can't just put separate it. It's there, it's part of you. Other thing has to do with the element of listening. I must mention this lady, Maria. I think good leaders are very good listeners. They listen very carefully. And then one of the other things has to do with choose your battles wisely. I,
Mm.
I didn't always do it myself, to be honest. But now I think, is it really worth fighting for? If I lie in my deathbed, is this a fight I want to have? And so things are more seen in perspective, courage. And then, of course, this is very strange concept called happiness. What makes you happy?
Mm.
And of course, I think happiness consists out of good moments. So every day you should try to create some good moments for yourself. But also it is the element which is of course becomes more important when you get older, looking back at your life, a life well lived. So it fits that you don't that you, I mean that we all have some regrets. It's always the case, even though we have ADP of saying I don't regret anything, as you know, je ne regrette rien, but that's bullshit. But okay, but at least you can look at your life as a consistent pattern that you have made. You don't want to make decision. You don't want to do it over again. That you feel that you have done some. But that's some of the elements of. So that's in the book of leading wise. But coming back to my famous, not famous, 7C model, which I love
I'm
both
sure it's famous. Yeah.
the context of Genghis Khan, is basically, the element of, and Genghis Khan was a funny guy, and people only think about terror and murder and things like that, but he was actually not a bad statesman. Yet, actually, he was in a way more effective than Alexander the Great. That's the most famous statesman ever. Now, the element has to do with self-confidence, I think is important. Element of courage, coming back to the develop of courage. Also, he was concerned about his people, even though it sounds not like that because people think about terror, but he was very concerned. He was also committing yourself to an idea, very strongly. You really
Mm.
care about that idea. Then the ability to deal with complexity,
Mm.
because it was a very complex military apparatus. This empire he had was enormous, largest empire ever has ever existed in the world. And then, of course, how to communicate. So he was very, very good in those patterns to do that. And those are some of the factors. Now, very few people come back to that can do it alone. That's the reason as a quickie, I also developed this leadership archetype questionnaire when I talk about the different roles leaders play. And the reason I did it was actually quite
Mm.
I got the idea, some idea of looking at it that way, that I had to write a report about the culture of a company who had been extremely successful from a small company had become a global company. And the CEO wanted to say, what is it about our culture? What makes it so special? So I'd been working with them for a while and I wrote a report. And then I came to this person to present my report, and he was quite intellectual. And he started to talk to me about all the concepts, and I couldn't follow him completely. He was right. I'm not completely an idiot. So I asked myself, how does he communicate with his people? Then at one point in time, I still remember, I said, I just went to this rather snowy place where was a factory, and one of you sent one of your people there to clean up that factory. And normally you would play golf in a nice sunny place and say you should say thank you. I said, I cannot do that. I mean, if I do that, he comes back to me once more. I know not only me, not me. But then I realized what he had done. I also met him in Davos, the World Economic Forum. And uh, and so he had a VP Human Resources would fly around the world and say, I love you, I love you, I love you.
Right.
Fantastic. And then he had in Davos when he was there was a lady, I still remember that, a tall lady walking behind him, who was the VP Communications. and she was telling the stories. But he was the deal maker and the strategist. That was his strength. So it
Right.
was a
So he
role.
complemented himself with his team. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's why I think people should realize is you can do it all.
Yeah.
And basically, I tell people sometimes, make yourself a little diagram. Like, don't like, important, not important. Very sophisticated. Like, don't like, important, not important. So don't like, not important. My God, what are you doing there? You're an idiot. Go away. Don't be
Right.
there.
Right.
Then you have like, but not important. Go fishing. Go golfing. It's good for the soul. It's a Dutch word. I'm Dutch originally. And it's Nixon. Nixon being doing nothing, and doing nothing is good for you because your mind is still working. And I have the best ideas when I'm
Yes.
walking in Jardin de Luxembourg or sitting in a cafe
Yeah.
around the corner and doing nothing, just looking at the people passing by. And my mind is working. Because the only time your mind doesn't work is when you're dead. Even when you sleep, you're dreaming. And then you have don't like but important. I have written many books. And one part of book writing, as you might know, is the final stage when the copy editor strikes.
Mm.
And the copy editor also has queries, queries. And so I said, how do you get it? Where did this quotation comes from? And what's the page number? And it drives me nuts. So it drives me completely nuts. Even though I can be a little bit, I'm pretty detailed about trying to find. I said this quotation is not correct. It's not this person. Where does it come from? So one book I wrote, which I like actually, also recently, is called Life Well Lived. Dialogue with the Kabouter. Kabouter is a Dutch word. It means gnome. So I meet my alter ego somewhere in Siberia, and we talk about the meaning of life.
Wow. Wow.
But this woman, the woman was pestering me, and so after she had done it, and I had answered all her queries, I sent her a note and said, "Dear so and so, do you freelance?" I said, "Yes." So I said, can I hire you for freelance for my next
Right.
book?
Right.
So
Because you needed that, right? Because that's not your strength.
and she said, I'm a terrier. I know. I said, I know you're terrier. So now I don't deal with her anymore. That part of because I hate it. So don't like, but important. It's done by her. And
Right.
where you should be,
What a
it's
great example.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but it's so true, right? I mean, because it's not the strength that you bring, but you're drawing on somebody, but you appreciate the other person's
I
strength,
mean, I also don't
even
know.
though it drives you crazy, right?
I sent her a note today, actually. She sent me a new book. I wrote a book on my intervention methods, which is the title we're still struggling with the publisher, yeah, because I wanted dealing with the elephant in the room. But that was not a good title. It has to be transformation. As the transformation should be in the word for people identifying the book. But she has sent me the whole works, everything done. No more queries. I know that now the copy editor of the publisher is coming in, but I'm not worried because she's a
Right. You don't
copy editor.
have to deal with all the little minutia. Right. Exactly. I mean, but oh, wow, that's a great example. You've given us so much wisdom in this short amount of time. What are some final words of wisdom and advice you would give to leaders that you haven't said yet?
Uh, to die young as late as possible.
Ooh, say more.
To die young as late as possible. What I'm trying to say is, I mean, I try to I try to bring the leaders often back into the sandbox.
Mm,
That's where creativity comes, to have them play again. And I still remember a comment made once by I had a reunion some time ago, and one of those CEOs said to me, one thing which is very important to me is it was why I was back in college. Everything was possible. And so he changed his job and became CEO of another company.
mm,
He felt he had given his best there, and it was time to do something else. But I'm trying. That's I think what try to do that people realize uh, so much unfulfilled potential they have, and they have been so stuck. So that's to how to help people to get unstuck, and that's not always easy. And that's as well as also your role as a coach and in your work, how to how to touch people and to say there's so much else because too many people actually are bored.
mhm.
It's full of bored executives and don't dare to get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, it's true. And unfulfilled and unfulfilled. It
And
get to
that
a point, it's like, why am I doing this? I hear that all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not for their soul, for nobody's soul. And of course, I sometimes say board executives are very dangerous because to get some excitement in their life, they are egged on by consulting firms and to start to buy other companies for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. No, you know, it's interesting. You said at the very beginning, I want to bring it back full circle. When you were talking about yourself and you gave your introduction, you said something, you used the word, and you know, people can sell their soul.
Mhm.
How do you not sell your soul?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I'm deviating, but I have always been told my students, and of course, the school I am, many of the students become investment bankers and consultants. That's what we are, we the Gates Production Center for McKinsey, probably.
Yep. Right.
Now, don't become a hungry consultant. That's meaning your role is to help people to be able to stand on their own feet, and to be their own person, not create dependency situations. That's, I think, one of I find that quite important. So and that's it's nice to see people. I think I was talking to one of my colleagues today. He was interviewing me for a person who was coming up for full professor. And I said, we are so lucky because, I'm not selling sugared water or something like that. We deal with people, a lot of people, and try to get the best out of them.
Yeah.
And that's
That pretty much sums it up, I think. Is
yeah.
how do you bring out the best in people and yourself, right?
Now
So,
you of course learn. I mean, it's every day. It's a learning experience.
right.
Stay curious, learn something. That's of course, an important factor for great organizations that they really create this kind of learning culture. But that's not always the case. I mean, when you think, I always say the Gallup poll says 73% of people don't feel engaged worldwide, and it's terrible. So the people go through the motions, and I mean, and that's what I try to avoid, that they really have a more fulfilling life. And that's what they do. I think that's what I try to do in my courses. That's what I try to do when I do team interventions. To and some, people also make hard choices. And listen, also it has to do with their significant other. We are talking about relationships. Some people realize they have been leading separate lives. The only thing that in common, they talked about their children, but then the children left the house, and then nothing to talk about anymore. So, what's good at 20 might not be good at 40.
Well, thank you, my wise guru here today for being with us. I'm gonna take that stay young as long as possible, right?
Die young as late as possible.
Oh, say that
Die
again.
young as late as
Die
possible.
young as late as possible. Wow, that's really profound. But so, thank you very much for being with us today, and I know we will get a lot out of the people listening will get a lot out of this. We will link all your information and your books and all of that so that people can hear more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.